Today's podcast is brought to you by Dell Expert Network. Dell Expert members receive a dedicated account manager. This is a personal one-on-one partnership dedicated to helping you grow your business. All account managers are extensively trained on a variety of Dell products. Your dedicated account manager, who is backed by a team of both subject matter and technical experts, will help you identify, plan, and execute projects for your clients. Together, your Dell Expert Network team will help you find the right solutions for your clients as well as flesh out larger opportunities. Join Dell Expert Network now at www.dell.com/expert network to partner with your dedicated account manager.
You're entering the MSP Zone, a podcast for the managed services community, covering news, analysis, and interviews from around the globe. Elevate your MSP game by staying in the MSP Zone. And now, your host, Charles Weaver.
I hope everybody had a fantastic time last week at IT Nation. I know a lot of MSPAlliance members were there. We unfortunately couldn't be there for a few reasons. I'll get into some of those, but I hear it was a great event. Had a great time as always. At least the MSPs that I've heard from, and we're definitely going to be making a concerted effort for the MSPAlliance to be at at IT Nation next year, 2023. No matter what it takes, I know we just need to make it happen. So why were we not there? Well, chiefly one reason. So, which is kind of the topic of today's podcast. We had our MSPAlliance Inspire group meeting in Las Vegas last week at the beginning of the week. So it was not conflicting with IT Nation. And then we had some personal things that we had to attend to, which actually caused us not to be able to make it. But we had our Inspire meeting, and then those members, some of them went to IT Nation. So just want to make sure everybody understood we weren't double booked for IT Nation and this Inspire group. But some of you may be saying, well, what's MSPAlliance Inspire? I'll get to that now. Going back to MSP World this year in March in Orlando, it wasn't the first time that it came up, but it's been a recurring theme for the last several meetings that some of the members in the organization have been not so quietly, not so subtly urging us to do, and that is to create our own peer group. And I've always been, there's a lot of MSP peer groups, a lot of good ones, probably some not so good ones, but we've always maintained, I guess a very different view of the traditional peer group, right? The traditional peer groups, the ones that are out there, kind of, you're a non-competitive, non-geographically competitive groups of small groups of other MSP executives, and you get together, you have an NDA, and you share your financials, and you kind of hold yourselves accountable. That's not all you do. You talk about other things, which it changes every time you meet. But for some reason, a group of MSPs, all of whom do or used to participate in other peer groups, started coming to us and saying, "Hey, look, we should do something." And I would keep saying, "Well, why? There's like tons of MSP groups out there. You have plenty to choose from." And they kept persisting. It's like, what? And these aren't people who are going to benefit from this. I mean, monetarily, they're people who generally were saying, "Look, we need to do something." And I kept pushing back, and asking why. And eventually it came out. And when one person said it, I thought, well, maybe that's a little, maybe that's just their experience. But then when I talked to other people from other geographic market areas. They said the same thing. And basically, I'll boil it down for you because there's many, many reasons. But the essence of it is that the existing peer group circuit had kind of burned out, had kind of run its course. These are my words, but I'm trying to interpret what I was hearing, which is, look, we need an alternative, and we need an alternative for professional-minded MSPs that aren't, just a feeding ground for M&A activity. Number one. Number two, isn't solely or predominantly focused on just comparing, financials and seeing who's the bigger MSP based on bottom line or top line revenue, but an actual gathering of true peers who have an interest to talk freely about a variety of topics on a timeline that is completely organic, meaning that it's not a forced agenda. It's an agenda of what do you want to talk about, and let the conversation led by the people in the room, the MSP operators in the room, let them dictate where it goes. And I was I got to admit, a little skeptical because it sounded I know how some of these other peer groups operate, and I don't want to speak ill of them, but there was enough obvious demand by this core group, and this is probably like 10, 20 MSPs, and they said, look, we want to do this. And so we tried it out earlier this year. It was really successful, and this was the second meeting in Las Vegas last week. And they even don't want to call them. They don't call themselves a peer group. They call themselves something else. I won't repeat it on the air. It's not a bad word. It's just I think they want to keep it secret. They want it just for themselves. So I'll honor that request. But it's called MSPAlliance Inspire, and they are non-competitive geographically, but they're different sized MSPs. So, but they're of a fairly, they're all serious minded, and I'm not saying that other peer group participants are not serious, but I am saying that these guys are serious, and they are more interested not in comparing, financials. In fact, they've never compared financials. It may have come up. I don't even know if it's come up yet, to be honest. I don't think it's ever really been an issue. What they talk about is so unique. And I'm not a novice when it comes to listening to and observing MSPs at conferences. I mean, I've been at MSP World for 17 plus years. I've seen that conference. I've been to other conferences where MSPs participate. I hear what they talk about. This is very different. It is a really different dynamic because there's no vendors around, no sponsors. There's no. I'll get into part of the vetting process is instead of having non-geographically competitive MSPs and having them all compare, be of kind of similar size. These are all MSP verified companies. They're either verified or they're in the process of becoming MSP verified. And that was one of the requirements that they made. They said, if we're going to have other people join, they got to be serious. And their level of seriousness isn't in how much product or how big they are, but it's based on their maturity, their growth trajectory, and the way they look at themselves in the profession, which I admired that and respect that. So anyway, that's kind of the rule of how to get in. But I learned a lot about these guys, and I learned a lot about the industry, and I kind of boiled it down into a couple of bullet points, which I wanted to discuss with you guys. Because observing them for a day and a half, even in a place like Vegas, it was eye-opening. It really was, to see what they're all jazzed about, what they're really enthusiastic about, what they're concerned about, what their problems are, what really preoccupies their mind. And some of these things may be very common to some of you out there. So I don't want to, overdo it in terms of what this group means. I do think it's unique. And I'm saying that because of the MSPs who participate say this is unique. And all I can say is that's what I'm hearing. That's what they believe every time they get together now. And they get together virtually every month, but then this is the second in-person meeting that they've had. And it's like, they're like long lost friends. When they get together, they are not skipping a beat. They dive right in and they just open up and they start talking. And that brings me to the first thing, which I think was just completely not even on my radar of a benefit of this MSPAlliance Inspire group. And that is MSP business owners, MSP executives. And there's a mixture of business owners and there's a mixture of business executives. All right. So in this group, there's a little bit of both, but they all have one thing in common, which is they use this meeting as a way to vent. Because when they get together, they talk about things that I would never hear them talk about, even at MSP World. Like maybe I'd hear a little bit of an undertone, and I I don't eavesdrop, but I walk around the conference and you see a group of MSPs and they're talking. They don't open up that way because they're in a public forum, right? Even at a breakfast or lunch table or at the bar, or in a session at MSP World, there are always people around, so there's always ears. And I think that always does impact a little bit of what an MSP might share out loud. But when you have them in a closed room and computers are off, nobody's listening over their shoulder, it's a controlled environment, they vent. They talk about things that are, again, it could be both a good thing, it could be a bad thing, it could be a frustration, it could be a challenge they are facing, it could be a number of things. They're not always bad. They're just things that, I phrase it this way. They find great comfort in hearing when they say something that they're challenged with, frustrated by, excited about. And when they hear someone else or two or three people in the room who say, I've dealt with the same thing, it is a remarkable reaction to see when multiple people realize that they're not suffering something alone. They're not dealing or observing something alone. And it's not always a negative. It could be an opportunity that they are chasing, and they're wondering, is anyone else chasing this thing? And then someone else says, yeah, of course, we're chasing it, but maybe in a different way, or maybe we've thought about it or approaching that opportunity in a slightly different manner. That type of reinforcement of, I didn't just invent this thing. That invention is not entirely my own. There's other people out there who think that's a good idea, and it gives validation. And, maybe it's not truly venting. I think part of it is venting, but part of it is dealing with the isolation of being an MSP owner and operator. If you own an MSP or you're an operator or an executive in a managed services practice, it can be a very lonely, isolating position because there's just not a lot of this type of intimacy where you can talk about these issues. And I know that there's public message boards, right? But I'm sorry. You're not going to go on Reddit and post a bunch of these types of questions and feel comfortable doing it. I'm sorry, you're just not. And I'm not going to talk about what they talked about. In specifics, but just trust me. They're not going to post these types of things in a public or even in a private moderated message board where it could get out there and it can be exposed to the light of day. They like bouncing ideas off of one another. They like hearing the challenges. They like, and I would say maybe half of the validation that I witness in these groups now, and this is the second one, like I said, that I've seen, half of the validation is just knowing that they're not the only one dealing with an issue, good or bad. It's something other people are also witnessing that just makes them feel a little bit better. They're not isolated. It's normal. And that is a very comforting thing, number one. The second issue that I heard a great deal of time was spent on this, and that's staffing, right? And now we've been talking about staffing for over a year now. It became a significant issue with the pandemic. It remains a significant issue. So a couple of things I learned. Number one, the tremendous amount of resource placed in cyber security education. I'm talking about schools, vocational schools. I'm talking about even 4-year, 2-year degree colleges. I'm talking about trade schools, online schools. There's a variety of this stuff. The consensus that I heard from this group last week is that the majority of these types of cyber training camps are not producing qualified candidates, at least for the MSP sector. The consensus that I heard, and I agree with it. It was presented this way, and I again, for those of you wondering, I am not taking an active role in these discussions. I kind of we play moderator. We're there to network with our members, but we're not actually we're not even moderating. We're honestly, we do very little talking, mostly just observation and documentation of what's being said, and occasionally ask or answer questions that are posed to us. But most of the discussions are led by the MSPs, like 90% of it. Right? So I'm not there driving this stuff. This is stuff that organically comes up and becomes part of the conversation. The MSPs just don't find value in the cybersecurity candidates that are coming out of colleges or the vocational schools. There it is. The consensus is that these cyber graduates are being groomed not for an MSP environment, but rather for a Fortune 500 security operations center. And that is I think it's really interesting that they observe that, because I think that's largely true. These cyber candidates and graduates are being told that they have incredible worth. Now, they're being told that there's going to be a big payday at the end, right? You go through a 6-month, 9-month, 12-month, whatever, 4-year degree cybersecurity program, and you're going to be worth X with no experience. You've never done anything in your life other than sit in a classroom. The moment you graduate with this degree or this certificate, you're worth, however much money. And they're going out there and they're having a reality check, which is kind of sobering, because they're saying, wow, no one's giving me this ridiculous salary that I was promised. And B, nobody even wants to hire me because I don't even have any experience, they're telling me. The MSPs are saying those same things. They don't have experience. They have exaggerated salary expectations, and they are ill-suited for the needs of the modern-day operating MSP. So what do the MSPs say? Well, they're looking for people who have people skills, management skills, people management skills, I should say. People who might work in service industries, food service, hospitality, call centers, any industry where you come into contact with the general public and are exposed to dissatisfied people who voice that dissatisfaction and expect a resolution. Those skills are what I picked up from last week, one of the top level skills that you can get if you're going to interview for an MSP. So, tip number one, if you're listening to this program and you're saying, hey, I think I might appreciate a career in the MSP arts. Well, maybe that time you spent, waiting tables or tending bar or doing whatever, in college or in school wasn't actually a waste of time, because these skill sets do come in handy. The MSPs, by the way, are more than willing to train you if you have native people skills and have the ability to be. Now, you have to be a problem solver. You have to be inquisitive. You need to be able to have a mindset and a mind that is naturally inquisitive, because problem solving, I think, is a chief characteristic of any level 1, 2, or 3 technician. Any service desk technician has to have an inquisitive mind, but they also have to have the ability to interact with people decently enough to calm them. Because remember, any service desk interaction is more than likely to deal with people who are frustrated, who have a problem with technology, and they need the problem solved fast because they have a great deal of pressure for whatever reason. And so these are all skills that became the dominant theme last week amongst these MSPs. I mean, maybe a handful of hours were spent just talking about, well, what are you doing to solve your staffing needs? Where are you finding your people? How are you training them? How long does it train them? Those types of themes and questions were being discussed, and I thought it was just really fascinating. And then finally, the last major theme that I want to bring up, which again, not a new theme here on the MSP Zone, and certainly not a new theme in the MSP Alliance, but cyber insurance and the role of cyber insurance both as a benefit and a problem for the MSPs. What do I mean by that? It's a benefit. Cyber insurance is a benefit for the MSPs because it is, according to them, and I knew it before, but it was good just to hear them reiterate it. Cyber insurance is a big driver for customers of managed services to seek out their MSP, get help from the MSP in, number one, answering the cyber insurance forms, and number two, actually implementing some of the practices that are being suggested in these cyber insurance questionnaires. The MSPs don't deny it. Hey, it's bringing in business. It's creating opportunities to talk to the customer about things that they talked about before. In many cases, the customers said, thanks, but no thanks, right? MFA, encryption, data backup, whatever you want, EDR, whatever it is. These are not new topics to the MSPs. The MSPs had been talking about this stuff to the customer, but the customers were always saying, I don't want it. Now, when the customer gets a cyber insurance renewal or for the first time, they get a form that they have to fill out, and the customer says, I'm not going to get my insurance if I don't answer yes to some of these questions. It gives a great opportunity for the MSP to say, we've been telling you this, but yeah, we would be happy to have a conversation about backing up your data, encrypting your data, getting you a password management tool, developing and implementing XDR technologies to monitor your endpoint and your network. All right, these are all good conversations. That's on the good side. Now, on the bad side, the MSPs certainly are still, I think what I took from last week is the MSPs are really unhappy about how they are viewed as MSPs and as risk centers compared to the reactive IT break-fix community, who are, in their opinion, far more at risk, far more risky in their behavior, and consequently so are their customers. And so there's a fantastic amount of time and great ideas that were brought up just about how to further differentiate themselves as MSPs, as MSP Verify MSPs, to get a better access to cyber insurance, to get better premiums from their cyber insurance carriers, and also how to bring those benefits downstream to their customers. And that was a fantastic conversation to behold. So, we're going to have more information about this. If you're looking for MSP Inspire, it's not up on the website yet. We've kind of launched it, in private, right? Just to see how it would go. And we've already got tons of demand. If you're interested, send us an email at info@MSPAlliance.com, and we can send you some information about how to join the Inspire group. The next one is coming up, I think, the next in-person is coming up in February, I believe, in Miami. And they're accepting more members. They want to grow the groups. And, I think it's just a fantastic thing. I'm learning a lot from these things. And the MSPs are obviously having a fantastic time of it, and they're getting a ton of value out of it. So I thought that was something really nice, and wanted to pass it on to you guys. And yeah, if you're interested, love to see you down in Miami for the next Inspire group.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give us a like. Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast so you will get notified when future episodes are released. We will see you next time in the MSP Zone.